Before we get started, there's two things I'd like to mention. The first is that all the slides, speakers, notes, and the demos are available for download, and I'll be providing a link at the end of the talk. I tend to be one of those folks who can't keep up with the speaker and take notes at the same time. So for those folks in the same situation, no need to take notes. Everything I'm covering is going to be available for download. The second is to please hold all questions until the end. If you've got questions, make a note of them and ask me afterwards. With luck, I'll be able to answer most of your questions during the talk itself. So, first of all, thank you for joining me to discuss admin rights and managing them in enterprise environments. As part of approaching this, let's first look at Apple's existing platforms and how the concept of admin user rights applies to each. So, Apple currently has 5 platforms, 6 if you're counting iPadOS as being a separate platform from iOS. So we got iOS, iPadOS, macOS, tvOS, visionOS, and watchOS. Most of these platforms do not have the concept of multiple users. There's just one user state in play by default. So iOS, iPadOS, watchOS, and visionOS do include authentication, but there's still usually only one user context which is in scope. Now, iPadOS does have the concept of multiple user accounts via supporting user sessions for multiple managed Apple accounts. But this is a special configuration option when sharing an iPad among multiple users. And all the managed Apple account user accounts are equal in terms of what they can do on that iPad. So the idea of standard user versus admin user really doesn't come into play on iPadOS. Instead, the user paradigm is equal user rights with separation of documents and data for each user. So when we're discussing the paradigm of multiple user accounts and those accounts having different permissions for access and actions, we're really just talking about one Apple platform, and that's Macs running macOS. But the Macs haven't always had it, though. If you look at the various versions of the original macOS between System 1's introduction and macOS 9, you see a similar user paradigm to what you see on Apple's other platforms. By default, there's only one user context, and the operating system would boot into it automatically. So if the paradigm we use today didn't come from the original macOS, where did it come from? Well, it comes from Next computers, and more specifically, the Unix-based Next Step operating system developed by Next, and Apple, of course, bought Next in 1996. So by 1998, Apple is using Next Step's foundations to build what would eventually become macOS 10. So this included building a Unix-based operating system, which included multiple user accounts. Now, more importantly for our discussion today, Next Step included the paradigm of an account named root, which is a super user account. So on Next Step, root can do anything. It has read-write access to the entire local file system, and it can run any command. So Apple had previously built Unix-based operating systems with super user accounts for specialized purposes, but now Apple is mainstreaming this paradigm for its main operating system of both multiple user accounts and a super user account which has more access and privileges than any other user account. However, there's only one root user in Unix, and there's only one password for that account. So sharing passwords is a security issue. Apple's solution was to introduce a new set of super user privileges for macOS 10, which they designated an admin account. So these privileges could then be applied to multiple accounts. So management of which accounts have admin rights is handled by membership in a group called admin. However, membership in this group only handles admin rights for the macOS 10 graphical user interface. To provide administrative rights on the command line, Apple is using the sudo command line tool. So this tool enables authorized users to run commands as root or as another user. So as part of the OS installation process, Apple installs a configuration file for sudo that grants members of the admin group all the privileges that the sudo tool can grant. So in turn, this means that members of the admin group have the same ability as the root account to run all commands and functions with the root account's privileges. So with regards to the actual root user, Apple put some controls in place to limit that root user account. So those controls include disabling the root account by default, discouraging its use, and providing ways to access elevated or root privileges using other means. So this same model, so this is going all the way back to the first version of macOS 10. This same model has been used in all versions of the operating system since Cheetah all the way through Sequoia today. So this includes using the admin group to grant administrator privileges to the GUI, and as well as using a configuration for sudo that grants all privileges possible to members of the admin group. So now there are non-root user accounts that have more privileges than other user accounts. So what's the difference between admin and standard? So admin users can add and manage user accounts, they can install applications, and they can change their account settings and also system settings. Standard users can change settings which affect their own account and also install software. Now, I could see some folks looking at that last item in the list, and the standard users list and saying, wait, whoa. Standard users cannot install software. They need admin for that, right? Well, no, they don't, because you can do something like this for a lot of self-contained applications. You don't even need to set up a special applications directory for them. You can just drag this into your user folder, let it copy over. All right, let's go ahead and launch it. Gatekeeper's fine with it. Hey, it's from the internet. Whoa. But there you go. There's a software install. That's a standard user. Standard users can 100% install software, as I'm sure most of you are aware. So it's also possible to install software as a standard user using the App Store. Now, that does not mean all installation is allowed. If you're installing applications via an installer package, that will request authentication from a user account with admin privileges. And without that, installation will fail. So from a user experience perspective, that request for authentication is going to be the main delineation between what standard user accounts can do and what admin user accounts can do. A standard user's authentication will be accepted, but an admin user's authentication will be accepted and the desired action performed. So that same user experience also applies to changing settings. When changing settings that only apply to the login user, no authentication is going to be requested. When changing settings that apply to the system as a whole, authentication by an admin user is going to be required. So now we know the backstory on the different kinds of user accounts on Apple's Mac operating system. Why does this matter? Why does this matter whether or not someone has admin rights or not? So this is why it matters. Anything the root account can do, a user account with administrative privileges can do. Giving admin rights to a user account on the current version of macOS means that they have all the powers that root has. So as discussed earlier, on most Unix-based operating systems, the root account can do anything. It has read-write access to the entire local file system, and it can run any command. It can do anything, it can go anywhere. So from a security perspective, this really seems like an easy case. Unless you're willing to trust your users with the ability to do absolutely anything on their Macs, you shouldn't give them admin rights, right? Well, let's take a deeper look at that. How well does that statement apply to the current version of macOS? So Apple has implemented a number of security features which, among other things, they limit the power of root and admin users. So the most recent change is the moving of macOS's system software to a read-only isolated boot volume as of macOS Catalina. Now, this boot volume is also cryptographically sealed as of macOS Big Sur, and if that seal is tampered with, macOS won't boot. It must be reinstalled. So to limit what the super user can do and add another layer to macOS's security model, Apple has also developed what's called System Integrity Protection, or SIP. SIP is designed to limit the power of root and protect the system even from its own super user. So as part of the security model, the macOS kernel has SIP-related functionality built into it to prevent processes from writing to certain protected parts of the file system. So this protection is in addition to the read-only boot volume. So SIP's configuration is stored in NVRAM. So the current configuration will apply even when boot drives are switched and also if the OS is reinstalled. So SIP is an overall security policy with the goal of preventing system files and processes from being modified by third parties. So to achieve this, it has the following concepts. It has file system protection, it has runtime protection, and it has kernel extension protection. Now, fortunately, that last one has grown less important over time, but it's still there for those applications that are still using kernel extensions. Now, Apple has set a number of directories used by macOS as being protected by SIP. So with some exceptions, which I'll be talking about more in a bit, all files and folders contained within those directories cannot be moved, edited, or changed by root or any other user on the system. So Apple has also set a number of directories used by macOS as being available to developers. So in one of the exceptions I was just talking about, /user is protected by SIP, but /user/local is not. That means developers are explicitly permitted to place files and folders inside of user local without worrying that Apple is going to lock down that directory. Now, SIP's protections are not limited to protecting the system from file system changes. There are also system calls which are restricted in their functionality. For example, for folks using dtrace as part of their development process, they can't inspect system processes using dtrace either by using the instruments application or by the dtrace command line tool. Now, however, for developers, SIP is not blocking inspection by the developer of their own applications while being developed. Xcode's tools will allow apps to be inspected and debugged during the development process. Now, for more information on this and where the various rules apply, I recommend taking a look at Apple's developer documentation for SIP, which is available via the link shown on the screen. Now, going back to kernel extensions, SIP will also block installation of unsigned kernel extensions, though, of course, this is less of an issue now than when SIP was first introduced. To install a kernel extension with SIP enabled, a kernel extension must be signed with the developer ID for signing KEX certificate, and it must also be installed into library extensions. So more information on this is also available in Apple's documentation for SIP. For those interested, the kernel extension documentation is available via the link on the screen. Now, SIP has a configuration file, which is stored in System Library Sandbox. It is named rootlist.conf. It lists all the applications in the top-level directories that SIP is protecting. So this protection applies to the writable parts of the Mac's disk. So in addition to that read-only boot volume, this is marking even more of the Mac's file system as being off-limits to being altered by the root user or anybody else. Now, Apple has defined some exceptions to SIP's protection in the rootlist.conf file, and those exceptions are marked in the rootlist file with asterisks. Now, these mark writable files and directories which are stored in otherwise protected locations. Now, Apple has also put protections in place for user data, which I'm sure a lot of us are aware of, where permission to access the data must be granted by either the user in question or by a profile delivered by a mobile device management server that the Mac is enrolled with. So these permissions are also not granted to a user account. They are instead granted to the process actually requesting access to the user data in question. So now that we've examined all the protections that Apple has put in place to contain the power of the root account, where large sections of the file system can't be written to or altered, and user data requires permission to access, let's re-examine this statement about root as it relates to administrator rights. It remains true that anything root can do, an account with administrator rights can do, but what root can do on macOS is significantly contained compared to other Unix operating systems. So with this lowered capability comes lowered risk. So no matter what, though, the key question which must be answered is, can you trust your users with admin rights? If you can, in my opinion, they should have them. If you can't, then they should not. But now that we've examined how admin rights works and their capabilities, let's look at managing them. So as discussed earlier, Apple has enabled an account to have admin rights in 2 locations. So the first place is by adding the user account in question to the admin group. Adding to the admin group gives the account the ability to authenticate for admin rights in the macOS graphical user interface. However, this does not apply to the command line interface. For the command line, as discussed earlier, Apple installs a configuration file for sudo, which grants members of the admin group all the privileges that the sudo tool can grant. So what's this mean? Well, it means that admin rights for the GUI and for the command line, you can actually manage them separately if you want. Now, if desired, you could assign admin rights in the GUI, but not to the command line, or vice versa, by editing the sudo configuration file to change it from Apple's default settings. Now, Properly editing the sudo configuration file is an advanced topic which we will not be covering today in this talk, but this is an aspect of admin rights management to be aware of. Now, assuming you choose to manage admin rights, there's really 3 states to consider. There's admin rights all the time, there's no admin rights ever, and there's allowing admin rights at least some of the time. So there are pros and cons to each idea, so let's consider each of them in turn. So the first is granting admin rights to your users without time limits or other restrictions. This is relatively straightforward, as by default, all you should need to do is add the account in question to the admin group. The pro is that the account can perform all actions that any admin user on the Mac can perform. The main con is also going to be the same. The add account can perform all actions that any admin user on the Mac can perform. Second is granting no admin rights to your users. Again, this is relatively straightforward. You just don't grant them admin rights. You just create the account, that's it. The pro is that standard accounts are limited in the actions that they can take. This is also the con, because any necessary action that a user may need to take, they may not have the rights to do it. For you as the IT admin, this may mean that you'll need to come up with some sort of mechanism which enables users with only standard user rights the ability to perform an action that they normally wouldn't be able to perform. So the last state is the in-between, where admin rights are granted at least some of the time to an account, and those some rights are taken away at least some of the time. So is there one answer? Is there one best way? No. What works for one shop may not work for another. So there are a number of factors that are going to affect this discussion. This may include legal requirements, complying with the requirements of an external standard that your business is committed to complying with, internally created policy requirements of your company, school, or institution, or even operational requirements within your environment. So as an example of external standard requirements, there's the guidance provided by Cyber Essentials here in the UK. For folks following this, it includes a specific requirement to use separate accounts which are used only for administrator work and not for any other purpose. And I went and looked this up to see if there were any loopholes, and it was basically like any server, any desktop, any laptop, anything. So in practice, this means that you would have a separate account set up on your Macs specifically for your administrative duties. So when you would need to do something which requires admin rights, you would authenticate using this account. Any other account on the Mac would not be permitted to have admin rights assigned to it if you're following Cyber Essentials. Now, assuming you want to grant non-permanent admin rights without needing a separate account, what options are available? Well, if you're a Jamf Connect customer, one of the options available is to add and remove admin rights for the logged-in user. Documentation on how to configure this for Jamf Connect is available via the link on the screen. Jamf also has a detailed walkthrough available on YouTube via the link on the screen. So how does this look in practice? Well, if you have the right options configured, you can just go up to the Jamf Connect menu and say, I want admin rights. And then you'll get this neat little thing that says you're now local administrator, and you can configure a countdown for it. In this case, I'm using 15 minutes. If you want to take them away, same deal. You can either just let that timer run out, or you can go back up to the Jamf Connect menu and say, I don't want to have admin rights anymore. Pretty straightforward to use. Now, something to be aware of is that Jamf has integrated Jamf Connect's capabilities into the Self-Service Plus app. Adding and removing admin rights for the logged-in user are included in this, so you can leverage Self-Service Plus for this task where you may be using Jamf Connect today. Now, for more details on this, please see the link on the screen. An alternative open source tool is SAP's Privileges tool, which works by adding and removing the logged-in user account from the admin group on the Mac. So once privileges are installed, a logged-in standard user can get admin rights using the process shown. By default, admin rights are granted for 20 minutes. And once granted, you should see that the logged-in user account is now listed with admin privileges. Privileges can also revoke admin rights from a logged-in user, either on demand or when a time limit expires. This is similar to the paradigm that I showed just now with Jamf Connect. Once revoked, you should see the logged-in user account is now listed as a standard user. Privileges can also be configured to use a menu bar item. This is new as a privileges 2. Now, these are the default settings for privileges, but the app also includes a number of customization options. For those interested, information on managing privileges using configuration profiles is available via the link in the screen. Now, are tools like Jamf Connect or privileges the right way in your environment to help you manage admin rights? Well, going back to our earlier discussion about trust, you really do need to answer that fundamental question about how much you trust your users. If you can trust your users with admin rights, then one of these tools may be the right way to help you manage those rights. If you can't, there is nothing these tools can do to help you with that. It is crucial to settle this fundamental issue for your environment before you proceed. Now, that said, many times I've heard the discussion coming down to this. However, the understanding of what anything means is really coming from this era, when it should be coming from this era, where a number of limitations have been placed on both what the root account and admin accounts can do. This, today, is the logical place to start from when trying to answer the question about trusting your users with admin rights. And that is what I have. For those who want to download the talk, PDF with my slides and the presenter's notes are available from the top link, and keynote slides with the the slides, the presenter notes, the demos, the everything are available from the link at the bottom of the screen. And with that, I will leave that up on the screen and see if there's any questions. Oh, got a question up here.
Thank you very much for that. Very useful. The question, what you're going through with the various methods of allowing admin access, timed admin access, is a simplistic form of, right, you are now in the admin group. Mm-hmm. And one of the things you can do when you're in the admin group, as your slide kept alluding to, you could create a user.
Certainly.
So, for situations where you want users to be able to do certain actions as a... Is that dead? Yeah. Where you want a user to be able to do certain actions as an administrator, but not necessarily all of them, like create a user that they can then go and use on the side or whatever. What tools and what tooling and what methodology would you suggest for that? My question is not clear, is it?
You're asking, can I limit the power of an admin user to only do certain things?
Yes, thank you.
No. Nope. Mm-mm. You want that? Talk to Apple. They have set up this paradigm a certain way where you are an admin or you are not. And unfortunately, because I've heard this question before, specifically in the context of these privilege elevation tools, this is why this question of trust is so fundamental. Because people are like, can you, it's like people have asked, can you make this privilege elevation tool monitor what they're doing? No. Can you make this privilege elevation tool limit what they're doing? No. All it's doing is you're an admin and you're not. Anything more than that, you really need to talk to Apple. Yes, yeah. It really comes down to this paradigm of Apple set up this paradigm so that it was like, we want people to be able to act as root without specifically needing the root account. And they achieved that for all of its good and bad in between. There is no middle way. There's standard user, there's admin user, and really that's it. Anybody else have other questions? Okay, looks like no. Thank you all.